Welcome to the Over the Hump Podcast. Your gateway to the world of the iconic Brahman breed of cattle. At BRC Ranch, our passion for Brahman cattle runs deep. Join us as we delve into the heart of this extraordinary breed, unveiling its rich history, exploring industry trends, and sharing captivating stories that define the American Brahman. BRC Ranch stands as the pinnacle of Brahman excellence in America, boasting a decade-long legacy of champions and housing the finest Brahman bulls worldwide. It's not just about cattle, it's about a legacy that reverberates across ranches and hearts. Brought to you by BRC Ranch, where the Brahman legacy thrives and stories are woven into the very fabric of ranching. This is Over the Hump. And now your hosts, Brendan Cottrell, Rachel Cottrell, and Keaton Dodd.
Hey guys, Rachel here. I am really excited for this episode of the podcast. It's a very funny and thought-provoking conversation between me and Braden House. So a couple of disclaimers. Number one, Braden is not a Brahman breeder, but he's a very excellent breeder of show cattle, and he judges a lot of shows that Brahmans are at. He works with a ton of junior customers, and his insights into showing and management of show cattle are just really enlightening. And then second, you might want to take some time to look him up on Facebook. It's Braden House, because a lot of our podcasts will be talking about some of his thought-provoking content that he posts on Facebook. So it's a really great episode. Lots of insight here. I hope y'all enjoy it. Have a great day. Hey guys, welcome back to this episode of Over the Hump Podcast. It's me, your host, Rachel Cottrell. And I want to preface this with today we have a really cool guest, but he is not a Brahman breeder. So our guest today is Braden House, who's the owner of Big House Cattle. Welcome, Braden.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Our listeners might be asking, why do you have Braden on the podcast if he doesn't raise Brahman cattle? But if you are on social media, I'm betting a lot of you actually already follow Braden, or if your kids show junior cattle in the Texas show circuit and in the Gulf Coast circuit, y'all already know Braden. But he is someone that's highly involved in show cattle and judging shows throughout the South. And he's someone that we really connect. Well, you are someone, Braden, that we really connect with a lot of your mindset in terms of management, show cattle selection, show cattle judging, transparency in the show cattle world. So many of your posts, even though we're in different breeds, they really resound across any breed. So that's kind of the background for our listeners. Would you get started by telling our listeners, what breeds of cattle you are involved with and how did you get involved? And if you don't mind, maybe your age too, because you are a younger professional in the industry who's made huge splashes in a short period of time.
As soon as I can get the blush off my face from an introduction like that, you made my day. I guess I could get into some details. I'm 29 years old. I live in Iowa, Texas. If you hadn't heard, my deal's just a little different than a lot of people, being that it's pretty much no academic background. I did not go to college. I didn't judge in high school. I believe we did maybe a contest or two. And so now it's really neat following every time the judging teams come out. I'm all in on what's going on and trying to pick as much up on that. But I raise and sell show cattle for a living. Yes. I mean, it's BHSC. And the last two letters are show cattle, but at the same time, we're in cattle production full time. Part of raising the show heifers is that we are in the pasture, we're in the field raising them. My wife and I both do that full time, and she's a photographer, so it's neat to, not that she does a lot of livestock, because she doesn't, mostly at the county fair and backdrops at big shows, more so than an actual picture pin, but having her perspective on things. And yeah, I love the show cattle thing, and mainly because I love the junior kid part of it, honestly, more so than the cattle part of it. I think if anyone that's usually a regular on the podcast and I have a lot in common, it's probably Brandon. After hearing his take on some of the things that we do, managing cattle for someone else's opinion that's not necessarily always representative of your own, or a management system that's not always representative of your own. And I appreciate the hustle that goes into doing that. But at the same time, I try to keep at least my personal kind of customer audience aware on Facebook that there's more to the story here. The story of a show and a 4-H project, that's the beginning of it. And these cattle are going to have a long life ahead of them. And so we keep that at the forefront. And I think a lot of the posts that you're seeing and that you guys comment on and follow, a lot of times my personal opinion and Brandon's personal opinion actually are headed in the same direction, even though he's probably not going to put SC on the end of BRC anytime soon.
Right, exactly. So what breeds are you currently involved with?
Well, so there's two, and part of the second one is almost kind of a plug and got us here in a roundabout way, but purebred Charolais is my number one priority. That is my favorite because whenever I was a young kid, when we were picking out a breed, I wasn't necessarily beholden to be loyal to one. I'm not first generation in cattle, but definitely first generation in purebreds. And so I said, what breed gives me the most different options to try to generate money? And I felt like a Charolais, just from a standpoint of casting the widest net, seemed to work the best as far as I can raise performance cattle with EPDs and be able to sell those bulls. As you guys know, every bull in our part of the world is either a Brahman, a Hereford and Angus, or a Charolais. Those Charolais females that are half bloods could be registered. They could show as ORBs, while their full sibling brothers are going to win every county fair, within 100-mile radius of here. They're going to be some sort of diluter, Charolais colored, slick shearing steer. And then, of course, the purebred heifers, whose ultimate goal in life would be one day to make those bulls. But for the time being, we have an awesome junior association to where those females have an added value just as a 4-H and FFA project and a cow candidate, because we have the state show and the junior national system to back them up, where a lot of breeds, you guys are very lucky to be in that same boat with the Brahmins, but a lot of breeds can't say that. And so Charolais just kind of was the center ground to where I could pivot a couple different ways in the coming, at that time, 4 or 5 years in our infancy there, to figure out how to pay off those banknotes. The second breed is, if you ever catch me away from our Charolais or you follow me on Snapchat, it's jerseys. And I'm not talking about purebred ones or show cattle ones. I'm talking about just regular, plain, gentle, sweet little jerseys, and actually do a lot of AIing them with sex female Brahman semen, because I'm obsessed with the recipient side of this industry. If I had to pick one sector that's my favorite, it is not running a blower or swinging a feed pan. It is babysitting recip cows. So actually, kind of in a roundabout way, getting just a little exposure to the Brahmins by way of breeding those jerseys with that sex female semen, because of what you kind of open the podcast with. They're subtropical, heat tolerant, they work. And that's one more aspect of things that I think gets overlooked a lot of times when it comes to making show heifers, is the vessel that carried her.
Yeah, that is an amazing story. I want to dig a little deeper on when you said you don't have a college degree, and that, if you don't mind, I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that.
Not only a degree, I mean, I never even applied.
So, here at BRC, we have a wide team ranging from, me and Keaton, who have master's degree, but then we also have Harley and Connor, who took that same route that you chose of, maybe some education, but not pursuing a full-time degree because they love just the hands-on aspect of cattle, and they felt like, hey, I don't need a piece of paper to prove that I know how to feed one. And I also know of some other junior Brahmin kids out there that are really good, I would say like stockman kids, who have chosen not to go to college and just focus on cattle ranching. Tell us what you were thinking.
I guess first and foremost, and I tell it to of course, it's always the little boys. It's never the girls that say this, but the boys that are our customers, I don't recommend that. Okay. I mean, right off the bat, I think everybody needs to go and get them as many skills and certifications, that they need to figure out that they want to be a successful adult. Because I mean, you dive in and you skip that educational phase, and one day the burnout happens and you're kind of up the creek without a paddle. So I definitely will never advocate that it was the smartest idea, but it did work. And I don't necessarily regret it because probably from the time I was maybe in junior high, I knew what I wanted to do. And it's exactly what we're doing right now. But you got to be a certain degree of lucky. I got a really good little job right out of high school managing a show barn for a guy that they've always been competitive. And I kind of look at that as my education because it was thrown in the fire, hit the road, and learn it on the fly. And the amount of money that I was able to save was a small part of it. But then you're running this race because you might be ahead of your contemporary groups in terms of not having the overhead expenses, but you don't want to let them catch and pass you because their opportunities are going to be a little more broad and the stars are a little brighter when they have that degree. So you got to make up your mind of that well in advance, and you better hit the ground running full speed because you can look over your shoulder and feel like you're ahead of them. They're going to catch you. I mean, it's not a competitive advantage unless you really maximize the experience that you're able to get while everybody else is at school. And that requires, I mean, an awful lot of discipline. Everyone laughs at me. I live 30 minutes from College Station. I'd never been to Northgate, still to this day. I don't really drink or have a whole lot of social life because all I want to do is made up cows and go to cow shows. And so if you're wired that way with a degree or without one, if you work your tail off, there's a place for you. And whether you have a degree or not, if you don't want to work your tail off, there's no place for you in the industry simply. I mean, it's just too overcrowded with people that want it worse. And whether you go to college or not, the people that want it the worst are going to be the ones that make it in the end. And there's a million different routes that work.
Yeah. Me and Brandon, we met at Northgate just for a.
Hey, that's awesome. I mean, I've certainly got no shame on Northgate. I have just never. You know what? I'm telling you a lie. I did. I don't know. Do you consider the chicken to be Northgate?
Yes, I consider the chicken the anchor.
So when I took my bovine elite certification, it was a month after I turned 18 to get AI and palpation certified. I parked my truck in the church parking lot next to the chicken, and when I came back, it was gone. And I had to walk to the impound lot about 2 miles away, and I made it there before the sun came up to get in my truck and go take my AI test. So I have been to Northgate once, and that's it.
That's awesome. Now we're kind of still talking on background history. You mentioned you had a bank note to pay off.
Oh yeah.
And we're the same way. We didn't inherit a single acre of land or a single cow, and everything we have is still mortgaged at the bank. Talk about that if you don't mind. I think that scares some people, but if you aren't lucky enough to inherit some land or cattle, that's kind of your only option.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I definitely won well, I maybe didn't win the genetic lottery on height or looks. I did win the lottery in terms of being in a situation where I could obtain access to some land to run some cows and some general infrastructure and equipment. My family has been the absolute best with the little punk growing up out of high school, just kind of taking over everything. And when I look back, I can't tell you how much I appreciate them letting me do that because I certainly didn't deserve the right to go in there and just stake my claim. My poor brothers are at a disadvantage because I'm the oldest and got there first. But yeah, I do a lot at the bank. Our loan officer lives across the street from my parents, and I've been very lucky to know him my whole life. And I can't express to people how important it would be to have a relationship personally with someone at the bank, kind of like the vet. You need a personal relationship with them, not a texting only or I'm only going to show up in here when I need something kind of thing and raise a bunch of hell. Be friendly with these people and get to know them. And a lot of times our little local bank and beat eyes, they loan on character. And so they'll take a flyer on a guy that wants to do some cow stuff. And if you burn them, I mean, you're done. But if I see something I need, I will go borrow the money and get it and figure out how to pay for it later. It's a little impulsive, but I think you got to have opportunities where when you see the things you need, you can comfortably go get it and just figure out a way to pay it later. So I spend a lot of time up at the bank. The ladies up there like me, I can tell you that.
I love that, and I also appreciate your point on saying they loan on character, and they know bankers notice your drive and how you work, and your dependability and play a factor.
Definitely.
Well, let's move in another direction if you want. So, if you're listening, if you're a listener, I think everybody should take a moment and go look up Braden's Facebook and follow him. A lot of it is on his personal page, Braden House, but your posts are just amazing. So, I thought it could be fun. I've gone through actually a year of your Facebook feed and selected, some of the real highlights to talk through.
I cannot wait to hear this.
Yeah, I thought it would be fun just to, you know, kind of talk about a Facebook post and then hear your background on it, if you're cool with that.
100%, definitely.
So the first one, I should have written down the dates, but I didn't. But the first one was the Skinny Brahman newspaper has been the best advertisement for the Brahman breed since the invention of the F1 tiger stripe. And I don't even understand what three-quarters of it talks about.
I have no clue what's going on there. Full disclosure, if anyone that listens to this had a sneaking suspicion that maybe I was researching Brahmins and in the Skinny Brahmin, you can rest assured that is like reading Greek hieroglyphs to me, but it is still funny.
I will say, I mean, I'm pretty much very involved in the Brahmin breed, and I didn't know what a lot of it was. I would have to ask people, what does this mean? What does that mean? So,
And then when you hear it, it's like the pettiness is impressive, but you don't hear, I mean, and I guess look who we got in office as president. Okay, so I'm not saying it in a slanderous way to the breed that it's promotion. Our president's the king of good promotion and bad promotion or all promotion, and the Brahmin breed right now is in that rut. They're doing better than Angus with the Bezos situation, I would say. Skinny has been overshadowed on the controversy spectrum, but they're talking about him, about Brahmins, and I don't know that the Skinny Brahmin is a good face of that breed, but people are talking about Brahmins, and that, it could be worse because they're not talking about a whole lot of other Bos Indicus breeds. And I think anybody that's savvy enough to follow a page like that knows that, for one, it's going to push into one narrative and away from another, and it's a marketing stunt by somebody. But hey, did you see the Skinny Brahmin? Did you see the Skinny Brahmin? Well, every time you say that, you're saying the word Brahmin, and people eventually are going to just kind of trickle in, tiptoe, nose around. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it could be better, I guess, is kind of what I was making with that post, because we all know that Tiger Stripe Brayford is a shining gold star, a big feather in the Brahmin hat. So Skinny ain't going to top that, but they're getting close.
yes. So the next one that really hit home to me, this one really hit home, just because you can dress in booty shorts for the county fair in the humidity does not mean you should.
That's pig people, man. They're out of control.
So I'm glad I saw that because actually, so I will share this. I'm 46. Yeah, 46. Last year, I wore shorts. They were knee length shorts to the All American and the state show. And then when I got the pictures back from the backdrop, I made a mental note to myself and I said, Rachel, you're too old to wear shorts. You need to wear capri pants or jeans from here on out. So
I mean, hey, that's self-reflection at its pinnacle right there. But these folks, I mean, our county is the neighboring county from A&M, and it's kind of the first weekend where they're all out of school. So we get all the judging team kids with their flat bills and their little short shorts. My wife could tell you what them shorts are called, and anybody that's judged in the last 5 years on a scholarship probably has a pair of them, but they're too short. And not to profile anybody, but there is certain people that can wear things like that and certain ones that shouldn't. But if it's at a pig show in June at a fair, just err on the side that no one might fit in that.
I love it. I love that.
And it's men, women, and everything in the middle.
So now we're ready for some serious conversation.
No doubt.
Okay, so here's a serious one. This one was in the spring, and you said it's spring breeding season. Be honest. Have you ever seen the bulls you're betting your calf crop on? I mean, get your actual ass in the truck and turn it on and go see the bull before you let him dictate your success or failure. Please tell me you at least saw a mature video if you didn't make it to see him in person. Oh, no mature video? That's convenient. I'd go look in person.
Yep. And the amount of people that come out of the woodworks and offer up some advice on a post like that, and then you look through what their calves will be out of next year. I mean, you want to see a post with some hypocrites on it, that would be the one, because no one's doing that. I mean, at least in our breed that I'm comfortable speaking on behalf of, the more, what do they call it, liquefy and face tune and just garbage misrepresentation that you put on an animal, the more semen you're going to sell him. They're going to use him and never bat an eye. It is so frustrating.
I mean, we don't use photoshopping to alter an animal. I mean, we'll take off a halter, but other than that, no. But I'm sure you see these screenshots that float around in your breed, but there'll be a screenshot of like a side by side of a finished photo and then maybe like a camera phone photo that someone took at the bull stud, and it's like not even the same animal.
Oh yeah.
Why do you think people should go look at bulls before they decide to use them?
Well, it's similar, besides probably even more critical than the recip thing. Of the recip maybe the vessel, but the bull is, that's literally half your calf crop. I mean, your next year's revenue on an animal that you've possibly never even seen. What the cheapest part of this process would be turning on the truck and paying the fuel to go see him, because it gets expensive once those calves are born and you kind of look around and no one else maybe has calves out of him, or the calves are not what you thought they were going to be. You could have fixed that by getting in the truck. I mean, and not to talk personal examples, but I drove to Kansas this last, I guess, in the fall, because it was extremely hot, and found this little bull in a pen with about 70 other ones, and they were running around. They hadn't had just a whole lot of exposure to people. Very, just green bulls. When I saw one in there, and I said, okay, that I think's maybe the best Charlie bull I've ever seen. Not the wildest looking, or on that end of the spectrum, or maybe the dumpiest and softest on that end of the spectrum. He's right in the middle and everywhere you need to go. But I don't know that I could have got a picture of him that day to convince you to use him. Does that make sense? Like, I loved him, but I'm like, oh, I'm going to come back when he's bigger. I made another trip to Kansas before I spent $30,000 on this bull that I just had to have. And as much as I'm not saying that the quality of picture and video wasn't good, because it was great, but I don't know that what I saw in person matched what I saw on the printed ads, and I mean it in a good way. He was a better bull than he pictured or videoed, and so when we've got a bull, hopefully I'm going to go get him tomorrow. Actually, our partner's been running him on his cows, and had I not made that trip, I'd have never found that bull. And I try to go at least lay eyes on the bulls that we're using. But my favorite thing is I want to own him. Like, I want to use the bulls that I own, because I see, for example, Brightside, or the bull that kind of helped put us on the map. I bought him as a weanling calf, and I've seen him every single day of his life since he got here at 4 months old. And that includes the bad days. And so a bull that you see online, for one, you might only be seeing his best day, and it's still probably an enhanced version of his best day, you know, and that's no shame. I mean, we picture bulls on halters and stuff too, but I recommend anybody come look at them in real life and see them. And I think that's the only way to get an idea of what you're hedging your whole calf crop on. But one staged picture it will not work here. I can tell you that.
Elevate your herd with the finest Brahman heifers from BRC Ranch. Perhaps you need to replace ranch heifers or you're sourcing elite show heifers and donor prospects. BRC Ranch understands your passion for Brahmans. We feel the same. Building a strong foundation is essential for long-term success, and we invite you to see our exceptional Brahman heifers in person. Schedule a visit to our ranch by going online to brcatrair.com and selecting a suitable time slot. That's brcatrair.com.
I had a real revelation back in the day of like probably 2001-ish when I had first started designing ads for club calf sires. And I'm very familiar with registered Brahman, but no experience in club calf. And then I started doing all these club calf ads like for Denver and stuff like that. And you know the picture. I mean, it's the staged photo in the yards and they're standing in the straw and everything.
Straw up to his knees. Yep.
You know what the picture looks like. I didn't have a mental frame of reference for their height, the height of these cattle. I thought these were like, mature bulls. And there was one picture, I might be too old. I might be too old for you to remember it, but there was a bull and I can't think of his name, but he was pictured on the halter, and in the halter, Carrie Gensini, who's Joe Gensini's wife, was holding him. She was like wearing a pair of Wranglers and she looked super hot, but the bull was right at her hip level. And until I saw that, I was like, wait, these are not bulls. These are baby calves, like these young calves.
Oh, yeah.
But if she had not been in that photo, I was still thinking these are mature bulls, You
initially just kind of thought he was a 6.5 frame, and then the picture showed you that he's a high 3.
Right, right. And that was eye-opening for me. And then I actually took a trip to, I think, Hawkeye, and looked at all those bulls in person, and I was shocked at their frame size, because they were all really, really small compared to, what I was used to.
100%. Part of that whole club calf scene, not to go on a tangent or anything, but a lot of the problems with that particular sector are because, now I'm not talking about the big guys, not necessarily even the guys that are winning the big shows, but so many more club calf guys are small mom and pop type because they don't have to navigate through the registration paper system that maybe me or you do, or the administrative part. They can just get them some cattle in one generation. They think they're raising show cattle. That's what keeps that thing propped up. And those breeders definitely have a place, but those are the ones that are buying the semen more times than not on maybe a bull that they didn't take the time to go see in person, because if they did go see him at Hawkeye or Integrated, they would recant that decision, but they don't. And so then they get used, and then, those genes just propagate out. And at some point, I don't know what bull and don't care to know, but there was a bull that somebody probably needed to go see in person that they turned around and used, that's contributing to a lot of the growth and structure and just things that, going back in time, I think the club calf guys would have wished handled a little differently, because someone would have seen those cattle in person.
Yeah. I hate to even open this can of worms, but I think the same concept could be said about getting in the car and looking at show cattle before you buy them.
Oh, gosh.
That could be a whole episode right there, but
we stopped doing online sales because of it.
Oh, really?
And this is going to sound terrible to say, but there was a couple of calves that we sold for way more money than they were worth because people didn't come see them online. And if you notice, I don't do online sales anymore, because I'm the one that's got to look you in the face and like almost congratulate them on a purchase when, hey, that was like a $4,000 quality calf to start with. I wish you would have came and looked, because now I've set you up for failure because of your laziness. If you would have called me, or they don't even call, everybody wants to be stealthy and buy online. Well, my whole job is to protect you to a certain degree from yourself at times on those impulse purchases, or maybe I could have answered a question that even if you go buy it from somewhere else, you'd have gotten a better return on your investment.
Yeah, or at least call and ask, because obviously some things that a picture or video can't describe is like disposition of a calf,
Yes.
Is this a calf for an 8-year-old or a calf for an 18-year-old, linebacker?
No doubt.
you know?
And then even that's a moving target. What one person down the street considers to be a pet and what me and you consider to be feral, even that is so subjective. You're 100% right. And still, your best bet would have been to go look in person because your definition might not be the same as the breeder on what's gentle and what's dangerous.
One last question on this little topic, but when you don't see a mature video or the animal died and there's no footage of him,
Oh, yeah, the magical lightning strike. Yep.
what's your take on that?
He won't get used here. Not to everyone has their thing, and that method of buying semen sight unseen didn't work in some capacity. It wouldn't exist. So unfortunately, you can throw enough of it at the wall there to get lucky enough to make yourself look smart. I just don't have the means to sacrifice a portion of a calf crop based on using a bull on propaganda. I've got to see him. I really, really want to own him. I mean, because in my head, if I like him enough to own him, I like him enough to use him. There is obviously bulls out there that a 29-year-old that's peddling show cattle for a living cannot afford to own outright. And sure, I may look into using those bulls after I've seen the calves out of them, because just that he was overinflated kind of Ponzi scheme money deal, that don't mean he's any good. It means literally nothing to me, because I feel like I could get enough miles on a truck driving through little feedlots in Kansas or wherever have you, where I could find him without the 2 extra zeros. And they are out there. I was going to ask you, and while we're on this, I think it'd probably be the best time to do it. I had a question, if I can get my little notes here to pull up. It was based on your guys' episode of how to improve your seed stock, and that y'all are like me, that you're in the semen selling business. So you face some market pressure to use your own bulls, because that's how you're going to sell that semen. The boat I'm in is probably scaled down a little smaller, but it's the same situation to navigate. How do you guys navigate using competitors' bulls, knowing you're kind of in a roundabout way going to sell semen for them, versus digging in and using your own bulls, knowing that you're going to get some marketing on the backside via semen sales?
So that's a great question. With our bloodline being pretty tight, sometimes we're limited on what bulls we can use. Like, for example, Noble is probably our most famous sire. And then I've got, 5 or 6 outstanding Noble sons, but a lot of my herd is Noble daughters. So I can't use those Noble sons on the Noble daughters. I mean, sometimes we do, but, it makes it tight. And so sometimes people do see, like you don't know these bulls, but people might ask, well, why don't you don't have a lot of Dutton daughters in your herd? Well, Dutton is a Noble son out of Boom Shakalaka. That's my most popular bull. That's my most prominent cow family and bull line in my ranch. So literally almost everything I have has that in there at some point. So what I've been doing in that case is anytime I have a customer that has Dutton daughters that maybe have a opened up dam side, I like to buy them, because then it gets that bull back into my herd, but I have the flexibility, to mate it up differently because of the dam side. Along this topic, you were talking about getting the car and looking for bulls. That's how we came across the Parton bull, the King Garrett bull that sired our Houston champion this year. We needed to open up our pedigrees, and we needed a bull that had a stronger maternal line. And so he just went on our digital beef database, that's our Brahman database, and set some parameters of like the criteria he was looking for. And this was an older bull, but they had semen on him. He was breeding naturally at the Parton Ranch. Brandon went up there and looked at the bull, looked at some of his daughters in production, and loved what he saw. And I know we've sold a lot of semen on that bull. I mean, we haven't, but the Partons, they've sold a lot of semen on this older, mature bull because people saw what it could do. But I would venture that without us using the King Garrett bull, most people in the Brahman breed may not even be on the mainstream radar. He was just a bull we purposely, intentionally sought out because he had the things we needed.
I think that's awesome, and I hope people can hear that and realize that whether it be him or another, but those bulls are out there. They actually do exist. And sometimes, and I know nothing about any of these bulls in the Brahman breed, but like he got to that point late in life with zero propaganda. He basically willed himself to get in a situation where someone like you guys who could put him in the spotlight would consider using him based purely on his results and production and zero on smoke and mirrors. So that's awesome that y'all found him. Credit to y'all for that. And hopefully people who maybe their neighbor has a bull like that and they're, well, so and so would never use that bull. Well, they might. They just never seen him. Go try him if you believe it can work. Because in the worst case example is, it's a flop, but then at the same time you might unlock the next cheat code there.
So I want to move on to another one, just high level. This was your post about 12 o'clock high on show heifers.
Yes.
Okay, so the full post says managing condition on show heifers. FYI, hair works the same way. 12 o'clock is circular, not linear. And you had a graphic that went with it that was like the time clock, time clock. After passing 12 o'clock, you simply cannot reverse and maintain it. You've got to complete a full cycle, aiming to return to 12 o'clock for your target show. With spring-born heifers this time of year makes maintaining it tough. Our best approach has been to let them breed naturally with a bull during the summer, allowing the cycle to restart and return to 12 o'clock for spring majors as a bred. Summer jackpots are a blast. Just remember 12 o'clock doesn't last forever. So for some of our newbies, 12 o'clock high is like a slang term, that means you are dialed in, like.
I mean, that's where you want to be at. Insert your favorite show.
Yes, we want to be. So I loved this because it's a perfect description of how we managed Margaret, Molly's show heifer from last year.
Now, I do know that one. Yes.
Exactly. So our target shows were like our junior nationals in the summer and then Houston in March. And you literally map out an entire plan in your head of how to have these animals at 12 o'clock at both times. But then you hear a lot of people saying, oh, that heifer looks stale, or that bull is so stale. They may not know what that means, but it goes all back to what you said in this post right here. So
yeah, this is going to be a mouthful. Okay. But you bring me on, I'm going to be honest with you. Our heifer that my best friend's daughter shows, she wins Fort Worth as a baby calf, and that was her goal in life. She's stale now. And she was very competitive at our state show a couple weeks ago. But anybody with a brain could look at her and say, hey, she was geared up for Fort Worth, and she was 12 o'clock at Fort Worth. She's about 14 o'clock at the state show. And I mean, that is part of it. I don't feel like that makes you any less of a feeder or a breeder. Will she come back to 12 o'clock? Hell yeah, that's the plan. But and I had another customer, he really tries hard. They do an awesome job. But he's one of those guys that's kind of always, you can't ever tell if he's happy or if he's pissed. And he's like, oh, how far backwards are you going to send my heifers? When I take them in to breed them, I mean, they're cows. And I said, we'll go as far backwards as they need to go. And he said, well, I don't like that. He thought I was like jabbing at him. I said, hey, no, it is absolutely necessary. And the next question is, how do you feel about Dallas and Heart of Texas versus Houston? Because you're going to have to pick one. I mean, there is, animals out there that surely can do both, but they're not the rule. They're the exception. Generally, when you think of just for example, like a $5,000 to $10,000 junior show heifer, if she was going to go her whole life undefeated, she doesn't cost $5,000 to $10,000 first off, and two, her 12 o'clock ought to be pretty good because that's a premium on an animal that you paid, but it's not going to happen every single weekend. And the biggest problem that we have, and I honestly, this is purely speculation, but just phenotype judging Brahmins, I'm going to group them in with this, that a lot of those show cattle don't get exercised properly. And it's not a mismanagement problem. It's simply a lot of times a facility and an acreage problem where they cannot, oh, well, we're not feeding them anything. They only get, like our heifer from Fort Worth that we showed at the state show, just as an example, was eating 1 scoop of grain and 12 scoops of cottonseed hulls twice a day. So poor Greg that owns the heifer, he's like, man, I'm doing the best I can. Well, but your turnout trap is half an acre. And that's not anything against anyone. It's just an obstacle that we got to navigate. And so when that one's 12 o'clock resets, it might go back a little farther than some others because we're not exercising them the way that they would as cows and working through that. That affects hormones and everything. Not to sound like Jan Bonsma or anything, but the hormones and the exercise do tie in together. And a lot of kids with the Charlet, they keep them put up because they're worried about the sun and the hair, which I think kind of foo-foo pseudoscience anyways. I mean, I think they need to be cows first and hair comes last. But the Brahmins at the jackpot shows that I judge or the bigger shows, you can visualize a lot of them and straight up just imagine they probably don't get a lot of exercise at home because they spend a lot of time in a pen. And not everyone is set up to turn cattle out. So I think when you get ready to decide where your goal is, you need to consider that you're probably going to take some losses down the road in order to get them there because it's circular.
Mm-hmm. We have a friend that owns a ranch in Guatemala, JL Morales, and they used to have this big show in Central America called Expica, and he would win it every year with this big, amazing 3-year-old bull, but the bull looked 12 o'clock, even though he was 3, and he had told me that on their ranch, they had a private runway and they ran their bulls down the runway every day to keep that, to literally build them up like bodybuilders. And you could see it.
Did he ever let him breed cows too? Or what is you guys' stance on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was just going to kind of share this. We, like Margaret last year, after Margaret won the All-American, which would have been like July 4th-ish, and when we got home, we drove her out to the pasture, not to the show barn. And we turned her out we unloaded her into the pasture. We let her she walked she was probably about a month away from calving. And Brandon said, like, she's going to have to walk for her feed and water and lose some weight. She calved naturally on her own. We didn't even know she had calved. We just found it one morning. And then, let her just stay out in the pasture all summer and then brought her back in early in the fall for the World Brahman Congress of November, which she won. But for 90 days, she was just out in the summer. I mean, Brandon didn't even bring her back in the barn when we had Hurricane Beryl. He just left her out in the pasture. I was like, please get Margaret. And on our bulls, yes. Right now, like Johnny Brahman, our bull that won Houston, every night he's naturally breeding anything that comes into heat at the ranch, pasture cows and stuff, just by hand breeding. I mean, he still lives in the show barn, but if Brandon sees a cow in heat, Brandon is putting him in a pen and moving him out to the pasture, and he's naturally breeding cows. And we do that with a lot of ours.
I love that. And that's on the bulls. I mean, the easiest way to keep them kind of lean and trim, but sometimes I think they can inherit a little disposition problems if you give them too long of a leash when it comes to breeding cows. But the physical stimulation and the hormones that come with that's a big deal for me on showing bulls.
Yeah. So I have one more just Facebook post that I want to talk about. Then I have some rapid fire questions.
You bet. Okay.
This one is a long one, so I wasn't going to read it. But if people go onto your page, it was a post you shared, not one that you wrote, but it was 2 pictures, one of a deer. So you had 2 posts that were kind of along these lines. One,
the deer and the club calf thing.
The deer and the club calf, and then the pit bull. And talking about, so one of the pictures to help people visualize, it was 2 deer side by side, and one of them had this, like crazy looking antlers. And then the other was what I would just consider like a regular trophy whitetail in South Texas,
Yep, like a low fence.
Yeah, and then you had one about evolution of pit bulls, and you were saying that people have opinions of what deer should look like, but you choose to follow the breeder who produce the more naturally looking one. Like, I guess the low fence.
Definitely. Yep.
A bull, I prefer a buck that can survive on its own with no human input, who can fight for dominance and breeding rights, and a buck that looks like what Mother Nature intended. And that one also really struck home to me because I'll just kind of toss this out. I see sometimes Brahman show breeders who are maybe showing what I would consider like a freak, and we've had one or two of those on our string, like for our listeners, Big Memu, 242, she's a freak, super bone, super power, but sometimes the freaks don't necessarily win the shows. And sometimes these new breeders are like, well, why? I have this freak. Why isn't she winning everywhere? I just want to toss this out and talk about this post and what your thoughts were on it.
Yeah, so that one's one of my favorite ones, and it got people on both sides of the aisle to speak up, ironically enough, including some deer breeders, which was definitely not my intention. Some of them thought that I was going against the deer people. If you want to breed your deer any type of way, just know it. I do not care. But for me, in another life, if I was a deer breeder, I think there's a delicate line between, natural and functional, and like you said, that can survive, and then one that you've manufactured. And while it might be distinct looking, it's the reason no one else has it is because it's a pain in the ass. And do you want a whole pasture full of these? My personal example, I went through a phase that I guess every young person needs to go through of trying to raise club calves. And kudos to the ones that can do it, okay? But there's a pelvis shape and a hip structure that God made to where an animal can birth. And then there's one that someone thought was ideal for a show animal, and they don't work the same way. I mean, a lot of them cattle, and I'm not just talking about club calf guys, because there's purebred Charolais or a lot of your Boss Taurus stuff, and then Brahmins have a completely different set of problems where the natural function of them is diluted because a person thought they were smarter than Mother Nature. Our biggest thing, I don't breed cattle for hair or for front ends. I just simply don't care, because when they're cows and I'm driving a hopper through the pasture, the ones that got, as Keaton Dodd would say, got a little leather, they just work better. And so, but if you just go on the show, breed off what you see on the pulse, maybe you're going to end up with a freak, and it might bring some money. But what about the other 8 of them? And those dogs, we got breeds of dogs that they can't birth unassisted. There's lines of cattle, not breeds. There's lines within breeds. And I feel like probably within every breed, there's something that straddles on that line that is just so kind of man-made and manipulated for a phenotype that they're not actually functioning at all. On the Brahmins that I judge, since this is a Brahmin podcast, I mean, there's a lot of them that got feet that are way, way out of bounds. Or maybe they got some big udder problems that, to me, like instantly red flag. Borderline just put a bullet in their head, and they'll have it at Transova.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, whenever I'm thinking about a Brahmin and I got my little jerseys in the lot that I'm going to AI, that is not what I was trying to get into. And there is Charolais that have massive problems. And we got a little defect going around that, depending on how your breeding philosophy is kind of how they approach handling that defect. So I'm not trying to talk about Brahmins in particular, but I think as far as your audience goes, that's the most easily digestible example. You might have this deer. He's got 67 points hanging off his head, and he can't even walk through the bushes. He has to walk around the entire forest because he can't go in there. That's not productive for me. That is not my speed. And so whenever I judge, it's a lot of the same thing. I would like one that doesn't need to look like a wild animal, but it needs to look like if I drove off and left it there for 3 months, it would come back and still be a productive livestock.
Yeah, I loved that. We agree 100% with, everything that was in that post. And I thought that was really just enlightening for people to see.
I appreciate that. I didn't realize people actually read them, so I'm glad to hear that.
Oh, I love it. I feel like you're doing a service of like a little bit of entertainment, but also a lot of just basic education.
I took a meme personally, and it's an old one now. It's not even particularly that funny because it's been used so much, but it's like that little pin, like you won a prize at work or at school, and it says, "I'm the guy that says what everybody else is thinking." I took that to heart.
Yeah. So, this has been great. So we have like a little bit, about 10 more minutes or so, and I want to move now into just kind of some rapid fire questions, not meaning we have to only talk about them shortly, but just some quick questions.
Perfect.
So my first one, we can pretend like this is like an official interview or something.
Okay.
So Braden, what do you feel are the qualifications someone should have to serve on a county fair board?
Oh, you have been on the Facebook machine. Yes. Okay. So I guess the biggest thing is these county fairs, it is getting so expensive to do this, and the stakes are so high. For example, at our local county fairs, steer brings in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $35,000. A lot of fairs, I'm not going to single out one, but you can probably figure that out. The people on them probably never have been to a cattle show outside of the county or a goat show or a sheep show, what have you. They don't understand how the ring is supposed to be ran. They don't understand, when the judge asks certain things, what they're actually trying to get out of you. And I feel like having skin in the game is critical to being a successful committeeman on a fair. It's very akin to the analogy of we want to hire a judge that doesn't know anybody. That's worse than hiring the judge that knows everybody. Your committee should be people who genuinely have skin in the game and who care. And that's up to you when you vote them on. If you believe their integrity and their morals will align with their expertise. But if they don't have the expertise, then they don't need to be in a situation where they could dictate the amount of money that it costs to get these projects to the end, or the amount of money that they're eventually going to sell for. It's kind of like you have, two local just randoms running your local bank. They're not qualified to do that.
Oh, the judge that doesn't know anybody is so annoying. And I have heard that, being the daughter of Jim Williams as a kid, I'm talking like back in the 80s and 90s, everybody would say that well, everybody knows your dad. That was pre-Facebook, and that was true. Yes, everybody did know my dad. But now on Facebook, with Facebook and social media, I think it's impossible to find a qualified judge that doesn't know everybody. Like,
100% impossible.
yeah, it's impossible.
It's the people at the gas station in town. They don't know anybody. Is that who you want to judge?
Right. Oh, yes.
And you have to assess whether it be a committeeman at the fair or a judge. Now, do I trust this person? But if they know people, it implies a certain level of maybe not expertise, but at least some savvy of what's going on.
Are we good on the qualifications of a fair board member?
Yeah, take your own vehicle while you're on your way to go look at the bulls you're going to use next year. Drive your vehicle to a neighboring county fair and go watch how they do it if you want to serve on a committee at the bare minimum.
Okay, this one's about Brahman. So when you think of Brahman, do you consider Brahman a, quote, show breed, or do you think it's a ranching breed?
Well, I hate to put my foot in my mouth because I'll be honest with you. I probably use Brahmins to supreme more shows.
Well, you should.
Maybe than anybody else. I'm not going to lie. I'm not saying that just because I'm on a Brahmin podcast. The people that go to the shows know I do, but I don't love them because I view them as show cattle, if that makes sense. I love them because there's obviously a certain percent of elite ones that can, I think, do a little bit of everything. But generally speaking, the Brahmins sort themselves at the show. You look at their feet and their udder and their top, you can sort them right there. And if they check those boxes and they do work, the fallout rate, I feel like, is pretty low. If there is some fallout, it may be some fertility things or whatever that I'm, as a judge, can't control or have any say over. But I can cut them right there at the gate on feet, udders, and silhouette. And then I'm thinking Brahmins are ranching cattle. I mean, because I live, geographically speaking, in the same kind of climate region as you guys, and I'm looking at cows developed in a subtropical management environment every day. So I can just lean into those Brahmins because maybe a shorthorn or an Angus, no offense to those breeds, they're just developed and adapted to be elsewhere, quite frankly. I love a Brahmin because I know I could take it home and make it work, even if I'm crossing it to do production type recipient work, or like people would say ranching cattle with them. I view them as a little bit of both. And the good ones, gosh, I just love them. I mean, and I will tie into one every day of the week to use her to win the whole show.
See, I love that mindset because you're so right. And back in the 80s, 90s, when I was showing in TCCA and they would have an overall champion everywhere, one of my favorite judges was Billy Wayne Key. I don't know if you know him or not, from Madisonville.
Yes, yeah.
Older cattleman. And anyway, if there was a Brahmin, he was going to use it. And his rationale was because you can breed Brahmin to everything. And Brahmin is actually a base of a lot of the breeds that are already standing out in the lineup. So yeah, you can never go wrong with using a Brahmin.
No, I mean, and it's like what he's thinking about too. And I always have it in the back of my head. And this might be wrong. Okay. This might be not the way that other people view this, but whenever I'm judging just with my background and stuff, the heterosis factor in the back of my brain, that how hard it must be to have a gene pool as tight as the Brahmins are at the top end, but knowing that in one generation, the amount of hybrid vigor and heterosis where you're not going to get that on that ARB heifer or that ORB or that key. I mean, hell, all these breeds are mixed up with some other stuff. Besides, I feel like Brahman, Angus, Charolais, Hereford, and ironic, those are the same breeds that I just said an hour ago were the ones that everybody buys bulls out of. Well, those things aren't coincidental. There's maximizing heterosis and having a female out there in a lineup that genetically is pure. The, the things I'm thinking I can do with him or her on my jerseys, that's all I can think about is how cool those calves will be. And that stuff matters. Some Heinz 57, there's just a capped ceiling on what I could make out of that one as a cow.
Yeah. I think one of my other favorite quotes of this entire podcast, there was a lot, but when you said just look at their feet, udder, and top line, you can sort them right there. And that is so true. I mean, that's spoken like a true cattle person, the functional things that matter.
If you want to throw me for a loop on Brahmins, send me to judge one where they're in, whether it be dirt or shavings or any surface that's up to their dew claws, because I get off in the weeds when I can't see their feet. I start to worry. If you can see their feet, I don't want to hear anyone say Brahmins are hard to judge, because they're not. Just like everything else, besides you you can really cut a lot of them out right off the bat on feet, udder, and just a general silhouette. And I think that's a lot of breeds. It's nothing against the Brahmins. And then when they're good in those areas, though, it's game on. It's a dog fight, and that's why I love the breed.
When I was first started judging, I didn't start judging shows till I was probably 43, so not that long ago. And my first one I judged was the National Brahman Show of Mexico. And that's a serious show. And there's a lot of good cattle and a lot of good breeders. And I mean, I'm not like saying there's any threats, but there are people in the crowd that, if you make them mad, they're not the people you want to make mad.
I can imagine, yeah.
Going down there, I was a little nervous, and one of my mentors is Randall Tip. I'm sure you know him, and he told me, "Look, if you get down to the end and you don't know which one to pick, just walk them. Just walk the top 5." And he said it'll sort itself out right then. And I always just remember that, and I used it a lot, especially in those like the older bull classes and stuff, where there's like 5 amazing bulls standing out there, and you're like, man, I could use any one of these. I just said, okay, let's walk them again, and it sorted itself right there.
Yeah, that's where part of you feels like it's getting really hard, and part of you feels like it's getting really easy because you like all of them. So you're safe, but it's just hard to say which one's your favorite. But yeah, moving them. And I always feel like if I showed up at BRC or you came here, the cattle we're going to look at are going to be moving, and you just default to being more comfortable seeing them that way.
So the last question I have for you, and then of course we'll do a wrap up, but we kind of talked about judging, and so this is a perfect kind of closing. How do you respond or manage expectations of your customers when you have an idiot judge?
I try to do some precautionary warnings, like, hey, if do you really want to go to this show? If you're my customer and I say, are you sure you want to go to that show? It's probably not because of whoever runs it or because of where it's at. It's probably because of who's judging it. And I think there's a lot of times where, because my customers, I mean, maybe 100% actually, now that I think of it, they're junior show kids. And so they're not really fully up to snuff on who's judging and what's going on until, maybe they get whooped. And people in the most genuine way possible that don't know any better, they put a lot of stock into what a judge says. If you don't know any better, a lot of folks assume that this guy must have taken a course, or this guy must have paid off a banknote with a set of cows, or that he's qualified. They can't fathom he's actually just the first person that said he would show up, because there's 77 other shows this weekend. So they give them this credibility that, and it's a quote that your dad had made about, you can fool the fans and not fool the players. Like that, I'm not giving them that credibility. If it's some just random judge, and I try to tell people, hey, that guy maybe hasn't never been around a champion. He might not, or he might just be good at clipping. And you bring him one in the middle of summer and he can't look at it. And I spend half the time covering up fires that some judge lit on this family that's really completely irrelevant to our actual goals of the project.
So even something I think maybe people don't realize is that some judges judge for free. Like literally, they will call around shows and say, I really want to judge your show and I'll do it for free. Like,
you get what you pay for.
Yeah. Like, and I will say I've donated some judging. I'm sure you have too. It's not that, it's not the issue of donating your time judging. It's more of like soliciting yourself as a judge. And the reason they should hire you is because you're free,
100%. Don't get me wrong. When you see me judging the Iowa 4-H show, I am not taking money from the 4-H club.
You're not sending out like mass emails saying,
I didn't cold call the lady that runs the show either and beg for it. But they don't know that is so, it's not a rumor. What you're saying is the truth.
Yeah. So if a judge is going to be political, and before the show exactly what's going to happen, do you still go or do you not?
Well, I hope the Charlotte people are listening to this stuff. We had a couple. I used to just say, yeah, I'll stay at home and not go. And this year at our state show, a couple breeders got bent out of shape because their judge choice didn't sort the show, and they opted to pull their funding and not show up. And I will tell you that the promotion they got out of this has not been good. And so I thought, well, if I'm ever in that situation, because it's liable to happen, you never know, where maybe we know we're not going to have the best day. And I've told my customers, this is what's going to happen. We're going to donate money. We're going to show up, and we're going to take our ass whooping like a man, because that's what you do if you're in this to support these kids and their project. You take it like a man, and you never know what could happen. But if you stay home, you're never going to figure it out. And that is a complete backtrack on how I felt maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But now I've seen the negativity that comes with boycotting a show. Open show, 100% different deal. Why am I going to waste my money and go? But a junior show, this isn't about me. And it's not my money to begin with. Am I going to show up and support the kids and continue to donate? The answer is 100% yes. And if you get your butt kicked, you wear a smile on your face and you go support those kids, because if everyone didn't get their way and they yanked their money from these junior associations, somebody like me would be looking for a job one day.
I like how you differentiate that between, is it about the kids, or is it an open show? And they have different objectives and different goals. And I really like.
Yeah. Open show, I'm 100%. I mean, I'll go, but I'll just say, we're Kevin or we're Breeden, or I'm not going to smear someone's name and smear a show, but I can probably find a reason at that point if I felt like I needed to stay home, if that makes sense.
Sometimes, from an open show perspective, I mean, if we know this show is a setup beforehand, sometimes we go, sometimes we don't go, depending on the size of the show, But sometimes you can get just as much exposure even if you go and the political judge beats a good one, because the crowd can see it. The crowd knows what's happening, and you can get almost just as much mileage sometimes by getting beat when you should have won because people are talking about it.
For sure. And it's as long as you kind of are able to get ahead of that and make a positive experience out of it, and use it as an opportunity to maybe connect with people that are interested, but not to be confused with knowing you're going to get the results you don't want and throwing a fit. Like, I don't think there's grounds to be mad if you knew what you were getting into beforehand. And a lot of people just, they suspect it, and then it happens, and then they look astonished. And no international guy is going to come to BRC stalls if Keaton is slamming a bucket on the ground or, curb stomping a show stick. But if he just showed I don't know, a reserve division bull, they might still buy him for $100,000, but he's going to be standing there, like I said, like a man. And the way you handle it matters a lot more than how you place.
Well, I know we've had you for over an hour, and I know here it's raining. It might be raining still there.
It's definitely raining here. Yeah, I'm fixing to take my bride to our Thursday date spot, which is the Mid-Tex Sail Barn Cafe.
Fun. Well, before we wrap up, I want to do like just a shameless plug, though. I mean, I've already mentioned people to follow you on Facebook, but if we have listeners out here who are looking for Charolais cattle or a source for their Charolais Junior cattle, what's the best way for them to contact y'all?
Definitely my personal Facebook page would be the best bet. My phone number is on there. And if you can't find it anywhere on there, feel free to slide in my messenger there on Facebook. That's how you and I have done most of our communicating. So I'm pretty good about that. If you don't want a response, send me an email, kind of like the outline for the podcast. It's been sitting in our email or in my email, and I just neglect to check it all together. But Facebook works for sure. And I tell any kids that when I judge a show or do a podcast, like, if you see me, come find me and talk to me, because I really do care about this stuff. And I think while maybe there's some changes and some differences in every particular aspect that could be made to make things perfect, whenever I say it, I'm advocating it to push it closer to perfect, not to tear things down. And nobody is immersed in the junior show experience more than me and my wife. So if there's any kids, whether you're on Facebook or you're just in the car listening to this, you see me, come find me. And I might judge you, and you might win and you might lose, but I'm rooting for the junior livestock show industry no matter what, right alongside rooting for functional cattle that represent it.
Yeah, I love that. No, I think your Facebook posts, I look forward to reading them. I don't ever see them as controversial or stirring the pot. I see them as thought provoking, and we need more of that in the industry.
I appreciate that. And so one of my favorite little podcast episodes, if everyone gets done with the BRC pod Over the Hump, is Malcolm Gladwell's Revisionist History. And it talks about, in an episode called The Big Man Can't Shoot, to go save you a lot of trouble down a rabbit hole, Rick Barry's a Hall of Fame basketball player. And he wrote an autobiography, and he did not retain editing rights. And he let his family members write certain pages in his book, and they're not necessarily the nicest things. I mean, let them rip. And where I'm going with that is, on my Facebook, you'll never see me delete a contrarian comment. I might not argue back with it, but thought provoking is definitely the route I'm trying to go. And that includes any and all feedback from all sides. It's not that you disagree, I'm going to delete it. I might nuke you on there and fire back with something that someone hadn't thought of or didn't want to hear. But I think it's important, if your mission is to provoke thought, that you have to be willing to catch it from every side. And my page is 100% public, good, bad, or ugly.
I love that. Well, thank you again, Braden. We're going to wrap up. I just want to say, thank you so much for the time you spent today. And also thank you for the encouragement you give the industry and, your desire to make it better.
I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that. And you guys having me on. I keep up with y'all from a distance, obviously mostly on Facebook and stuff. And it seems like you kind of got the Brahman recipe figured out, and we sure enjoy following it. And it means an awful lot to be able to jump on a phone call with you, because if anybody's wondering, me and you didn't rehearse this at all. I mean, it's literally just a phone call, and I love the platform and what you guys are doing. And if y'all ever get bored, whether you want to record it or not, feel free to give me a holler.
All right. Well, hope you all have a great lunch at Midtex.
I sure appreciate it. Hope you stay dry, and we'll catch up with you later.
Okay, bye.
You've been listening to the Over the Hump Podcast. Our passion is Brahman cattle, and it runs deep. And this show is about its rich history, industry trends, and stories that define the American Brahman. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram and Facebook at BR Contraire. See you next time on the Over the Hump Podcast.